Hi guys, my name is Neeraj Yadav and I'm from BCom Honors Section D. My roll number is 638. So my topic to explain for GST is time of supply. So to understand the time of supply, we need to focus basically on these questions. So these if we'll clarify these questions, this will help to understand the topic of time of supply. So basically first we'll be studying what is time of supply, then why it is important to determine the time of supply, then various sections involved in the time of supply, important and statutory provisions of the time of supply, then how to determine time of supply in the case of goods, and how to determine the time of supply in case of services, and then provisions regarding to the change in tax rate in goods in case of services. So we'll start with the first part. Then, as we have learnt in the earlier chapters, GST is always payable on the taxable supply. So taxable supply is the supply of goods and services chargeable to the tax. After determining the place of supply, it is important to know the time when the tax liability arises. That is the date on which tax event has occurred. The time of supply. Time of supply determines the point of the time when the liability to charge GST arises. That is due to the due date of payment of GST to the government. Why it is important to determine the time of supply? Normally, GST is to be paid on the monthly basis, and GST of the current month should be paid by 20th day of the succeeding month. Therefore, it is very important to determine the exact date of the supply of GST, so the liability of the GST to be discharged on the time. So time of supply can be linked with the various events like issue of invoice, receipt of payment, due date of issue of invoice, due date of date of services rendered or goods delivered. There are various sections involved in this, like time of supply of goods covered under section 12 of CGST. Time of supply of services is covered under section 13 of CGST, and section 14 covers the provision when there is a change in rate of tax on the supply of goods and services. Important statutory provisions. Issue of invoice and date of receipt of the payment shall determine the time of supply. Before discussing the provisions of section 12 and 13, let us understand the statutory requirement for the issue of invoice in case of goods and services, and date of receipt of payment. By what time the invoice should be issued in the supply of goods? Invoice should be prepared before or at the time of removal of goods for supply, delivery of goods, making available goods to the recipient. Removal means dispatch of goods by a supplier or any other person acting on the behalf of supplier, or collection of goods by the recipient or in any person or to any other person on the behalf of recipient. So we can understand this by the example. Shyam dispatches goods to Sohan from his outlet on 9th September 2019. So the invoice can be issued before or on 9th of September. In case of supply of goods on the continuous basis, the invoice should be issued before or at the time of issue of periodical statement or the receipt of periodical payment. In case of goods sent on the approval or sale or return, the invoice should be within the 6 months of date of removal and the date when the recipient indicates the acceptance of goods, whichever is earlier in these days. By what time invoice should be issued in case of supply of services? Invoice should be issued within 30 days from the date of supply of services. This limit is 45 days in case of insurers, banking companies, financial institutions, including NBFCs. Continuous supply of services means a supply of services which is provided continuously on recurrent basis under a contract. Contract is for period exceeding 3 months with periodic payments. Invoice should be issued on or before due date of payment, time when the payment is received by supplier, date of completion of event. When services is provided between distinct person, in case of accounts of the supplier, or date on which the payment is credited to the bank of the supplier, whichever is earlier. For example, X receives check for the payment of the supply of services on 13th November 2019. It is recorded in the books of accounts on 15th November 2019. It is credited in the bank account on 18th of November. So the date of receipt of payment will be 15th November 2019. In the next segment, we shall be covering time of supply of in the case of goods on the services. So now we'll be studying the time of supply in case of goods and in case of services. So we have understood the concept of date of issue, date of payment, and date of receipt of payment. So now we'll study the time of supply of goods. First we'll study the time of supply under the normal charge. Under section 12 subsection 2, as per the current rule which is applicable with respect from 15th of November 2017, the time of supply of goods, the date of invoice or the last date on which the supplier is required to issue invoice, whichever is earlier. For the composition suppliers, the time of supply of date of issue of invoice or date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. As per provision to section 12 subsection 2b, where the supplier of the taxable good receives an amount up to rupees 1000 in excess of amount indicated in the tax invoice, the time of supply shall be the date of issue of invoice in respect of such excess amount. So we can understand this with the example: Mr. X sold the goods to Mr. Y worth 5 lakh and received in advance the payment of 1,50,000, which was entered in the books of accounts on 15th December 2019. The invoice was issued on 21st December 2019. The balance payment of 3,50,000 was recorded and entered in the books of accounts on 24th December. Goods were delivered on 24th December. Here, the time of supply of goods is 21st of December and taxable liability to be discharged by 20th January. That is the latest of 20th day of exceeding month of time of supply. We can understand this better with the second example. Mr. X, a manufacturer of plastic boxes, receives an order of supply of 2000 box from LMN Limited on September 30, 2019 and receives an advance of 10 lakh rupees along with the order on the same day. He starts manufacturing on October 5 and completed the order on October 15. Packaging completed on 17th of October. On 18th October, goods are delivered to LMN Limited. On the same day, Z receives the remaining payment. The tax invoice is issued on 20th October 2019. Here, the time of supply of goods will be the date of delivery, that is the 15th of October. Under the reverse charge, the time of supply shall be earlier of the following: date of receipt of good, date of payment entered in the books of accounts of recipient, date of payment debited in his account, whichever is earlier, date immediately following the 30 days of date of issue of invoice by the supplier. For example, A Limited delivered goods to the B under the contract which were received on the B on 4th of October 2019. Invoice was issued on 3rd September 2019. The payment was made on 5th November 2019. Amount debited by the bank on 6th November 2019. The time of supply of goods shall be determined as follows: the date of receipt of goods 4th October 2019, the date of payment or date of debit whichever is earlier 5th November 2019, next date after date of invoice plus 30 days, that is 31 that is 4th September 2019. So the time of supply of good will be the 4th September 2019, which is the earlier of all the three. Then time of supply in case of supply of voucher. A voucher is an instrument where the supplier is under obligation to accept its consideration for supply of goods or services. A voucher can be issued for specific supply, or it can be issued for the general purpose, which can be used for variety of purposes. That is, in these cases, the time of supply shall be, if the supply is identifiable at the time of issue of voucher, the date of issue of voucher. If the supply is not identifiable at the time of issue, the date of redemption of the voucher. For residual cases, where it is not possible to determine the time of supply under the above criteria, Then time of supply shall be where periodical return has to be filed, date on which the return has to be filed. In other cases, date on which the GST is to be paid. The time of supply in relation to the increase in value of supply by the way of interest, penalty, etc. It shall be date on which the supplier receives such addition of value. So now we will do the time of supply of the services. Time of supply of the services under the normal charge. Time of supply of the services under the normal charge. It will be the earliest of the following dates when the invoice is issued within the period prescribed when invoices